thanks to Greg and Sean for so many things. And it's a pleasure to be able to do the keynote today. What I want to accomplish here is to not compete with all the wonderful presentations everyone else has been doing about how to use Tempest, how to do resource management, because I couldn't possibly do a better job than everyone else. What I want to do is paint a different picture and basically start with Simon Simek's perspective of why do we really want to do this? And we all know that we want to do it because things could be, are fairly difficult at work if we don't get people doing the right work. But I think there's a completely different reason now. We've been probably 5 years moving towards a change. And COVID-19 has really been a game changer. It's moved that change curve up significantly. So the new terms are that we're in the post-digital age. The new terms are that we're in the fourth industrial revolution. What does that mean? I believe it means that we're changing our view of what's important. The last era was basically very much centered around what we'll call financial capital, the little green box that you see. I would like to contend that what's important today is people, because you've heard a lot of people say that, people are one of the largest expenses for corporations. But the reason that makes sense is because without people, there is no output, there is no creativity. So let's start by acknowledging they aren't just an expense. We aren't just an expense. We're how things get done. So if we put people at the top, there's still something we understand, and that's the need for agility. So I want to share a really quick story. I was in Columbus, Ohio, meeting with an organization, and the CIO had asked me to come out to convince the CEO that he really wanted IT to convert to Agile. So we gave the whole long dog and pony show. And then I said, if you do this right, you can get teams and project managers who are empowered to do on-the-ground decision-making to get things done. At that point in time, the man stood up, looked at the CIO, and said, I want what she's selling. That was a profound insight. He really didn't care how software development was done. It meant nothing to him. What meant something to the CEO was making decisions appropriately at the right time to continue to get something productive done. I think this shift is going to move us to focusing on the individual, the team. We'll talk a little later about the human-machine technology partnership. And then I promise you, I will get to why this is the perfect solution for making millennials happy. So many of you have had an opportunity to see that this is our third go-round with what we call the resource management maturity model. I want to put that in the context. If we were in person, I would ask all of you to raise your hand if you're familiar with the old diagram that shows for Agile a skateboard, a manual scooter, a power scooter, and a car. So since I've been in the Agile movement since way before we called it Agile, I will tell you that this has been progressive. We have done our skateboard, we have done our scooter, and as I told my girlfriend in Australia last night, we're actually at a golf cart today. So I hope you appreciate the golf cart edition. So classically, maturity models are steps. And to be honest, I started presenting it like that. And then I realized that's really not appropriate for where we are today. We don't want to convey that this is adding more and more and more and more stuff, more procedures, more paperwork, more this, more that, because that's really not where we're at. What we want to do is say that we're maturing the same way a child matures. First, babies can turn over, then they can crawl, then they can stand up with support, and eventually they can walk. All of that happens organically. That is how human beings are wired. I would like to contend that when we look at this subject, it can be just as natural. It doesn't mean it doesn't take effort. Any of you with little children know there's a lot of effort that goes into standing up those first couple of times. But it's something that we can evolve through organically. So all of us start at a reactionary point. I don't know about you, but I first realized that there was something going wrong when I was sitting in a meeting with my team. And I, like every single one of you, asked, who have we got who can do this? I wasn't expecting this. We've now got to jam this work into. It's a reactionary perspective. I have sat in meetings with clients while I was at Gartner for years, where they show me spreadsheets and we're looking at 15% availability of somebody, and we're going to try to take that 15% and we're going to assign it to another project. Well, everybody on this call knows, yeah, it might get us through what happens in one day, but it's not a good solution. So eventually, all organizations come to a point where they go, there's got to be a better way to do this. From there, the next evolution is, and I like to say, you find a great tool and you buy it, a la Prosymmetry, and that serves as your structure for the progression of getting people assigned to the right work, getting work scaled to the right limit. And that does take determined effort. It doesn't come for free. You have to keep your eye on the ball and move forward. From there, once you get the basic blocking and tackling done, I think all the good stuff starts. If you're dedicated enough to continuously improve, this is where you start getting towards all the people stuff and really start preparing your organization for being best in class. When we've got that accomplished, we hit the next point. Innovation starts to be where we simply are capturing the right next thing to do, the next mousetrap, again, organically. And that, by the way, is a trigger to where we can start to understand some of what millennials want. We need to not make innovation a highly formal process. We need to nurture it on an ongoing basis. Transformation, this relates to the fact that right now corporations have approximately a 14-year lifespan on the stock market. Before they're acquired, they go out of business, they fall bankruptcy, it doesn't matter. What I talked about the last time I presented this is where we jump the S curve. The key there is what jumping the S curve is that I decide on my strategy. I intend to transform my business, but while I'm transforming my business, I have to keep operating it. And then once I've created the new business, I begin to operate that. These are the pieces that I have identified that are really where we've got to focus their time. Now, first reaction may be, hey, Donna, we're only talking about people and skills and getting things organized, et cetera, et cetera. And my answer is, yeah, not so much. Everything is contextual. Part of the reason these transformations don't work is when we get them too isolated. Senior management only cares about the product. As I mentioned with the CEO, He didn't care how software was developed. He cared how decisions were made to keep the results coming. I would contend today, what do we sell to senior management for those of you who are not already on the path? Enterprise agility. That if we do this, if we become experts at what I'm calling people capability management and not just resource management, because I don't know about the rest of you, for the last 25 years, people have said to me, Donna, resource management is a terrible term. It's all about people. And yeah, I agree. So somewhere we need to make the name change. But if we start programming with agility, everything we do will get us better agility. We can then go to the next step. Now, this was something that I had to struggle with a lot. My experience is almost exclusively on the strategy execution part, other than when I worked for a consulting company. There are two entrance points. If you work for a consulting company or any fee-for-service organization, you usually come in through a need for operational excellence. Every hour is billable. That is your source of revenue. That is what you have to optimize. If you are on the IT side, you generally come in through strategy execution. So you get a conflict between strategy and how much is going in to run the business work. I do think it's important which side you're coming in through, because you may need to do more technology sooner if you're in operational excellence. You may need to do more team and individual work if you're coming in through strategy execution. The reason I bring this up is, again, every single one of you, as you go on your journey, is going to need to take one from column A, one from column B, one from column C. It's important to understand that this is a journey that operates in an integrated whole. Now, we have 5 capabilities, but there are 2 highly important sub-disciplines that I want to explore here. The first is team discipline. For those of you who've already entered into the Agile software journey, you know there's a focus on teams. I want to expand that notion. I see a lot of fixed teams. I see a lot of concentrated teams with specialists all in one area, what we used to call centers of excellence. That's really not the teams I'm talking about. The wave of the future, if you read anything from HBR, from Sloan, what you'll see is we need cross-functional teams. Not only formal cross-functional teams, but casual cross-functional teams. We need to create an environment where all people who work for the company feel free to go to somebody else in the next department and say, there is a piece of work that needs to be done to accomplish a goal. I need your help to do it. I've talked to multiple IT organizations who tell me, Donna, we got resource management in IT all settled and it's good and it's working. And guess what? All we've done is shift the bottleneck. We now can't get the business involved. We can't get testing done. I'm just telling you all what you experience on a daily basis. That's a culture change that we're going to have to do. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, a minute. So what do we see with high-performing teams? We've been talking about high-performing teams for 20, 30 years, but there are certain things that we know. We need associational thinkers. What does that mean? It basically means people who can carry a wide diversity of thinking. And when they hear something, they go, oh, that might be the answer, the totally unrelated fact that solves the problem I have today. The team needs to be able to dynamically come together and share a focus. They need to be self-directed. And more than that, they need to realize the change is going to happen as they're moving forward. Basically, in today's world, linearity isn't really a common thing, and it's certainly not a goal. Now, what are team enabling activities? All the stuff we know: resource capacity planning, skills identification, all of that good stuff that we all understand, and it's critically important. Let's get to the last area, individual focus. I would contend that people have not been getting the right, individuals have not been getting the right acknowledgement or support. Couple of things there. A couple of speakers have mentioned the Resource Management Institute, and I was privileged to do a closing keynote for them. And what I'd like to say is that we do need a new discipline that helps us focus on people. HR is too far away. We've seen that HR is there to serve corporate management. They're there to treat people as a group. We also have corporate learning. Yeah, again, they're there to administer training to a group. I once had the opportunity, when I worked for a very large consulting company, to do a tour of duty through being head of curriculum development for the consulting group. I actually had to focus on individuals, but the important key was I had to focus on individuals who I knew and understood as my peers. So when we talk about dealing with people, they're really the people who sit next to us. They're really the human beings. And that's a change. We can't start looking at groups. We need to say, are we enabling each unique human being to get access to those tools, the knowledge, the experiences they need to be the best in class they can be? So let's dig a little bit more into the 5 capabilities. This model that I'm showing you is really different than probably what you've come to expect. We have I'm going to contend that we can divide it in 3s. That's as far as I've gotten right now. And look at what are the specific activities. So for enterprise agility, where do we want to start? Like many of the speakers here have said, we want to identify people, roles required to complete initiatives. Very simple, incredibly important. We want to do that early because we need to know because we've got all sorts of plans. Do we have the right people? Do they have the right training? And then as they go forward, one of the things that anyone who's ever done portfolio management will tell you is, guess what gets dropped? All the interdependencies. You approve this project or that program, and then you forget that they require other things. Simple, standard, but we've got to make sure that we're not going any further than what we can execute. Now, at level 3, I said plan for frequent deliveries of outcomes, then stop. Now, that's a shocking thing to anyone in IT. But I'll tell you a story that Jim Highsmith, who was one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, shared with me. He was working with a client who needed a CRM system, and they broke the program into thirds. And when they got the first piece of work done, which was a lead tracking system. He met with the CEO who said, you know what? We don't need to do anything else because lead tracking really was my problem. And I've received 80% of the value that I can get out of CRM now. And I don't need to go any further. Many people either don't know or have forgotten that one of the big original benefits of Agile was that it was designed to be short, fast, get it in and see what happens. There's a great book on Agile software that said what I consider the premier rule. All software is evolutionary. When we implement it, we fundamentally change the nature of reality. Now, that's a mental model. It's not on my mental model list here, but it's an important one because it says we only want to go as far as we need to go to make the desired change, and then we want to see what will emerge. So, for those of you who recognize the lattice of mental models, that's Charles Munger. And what I listed is the mental models as I learned them over time. It's hard to talk about thinking models with most groups because they go, Donna, that's esoteric. But as we move forward, these are the shortcuts. Every single thing on that list is a shortcut that will help your people plan better, respond better, understand what's happening faster. And you got to ask yourself, why aren't we teaching this? If we can move organizations from analysis paralysis, if we can avoid political discussions, which we'll talk about in a moment, why aren't we focusing on that? The answer is largely we haven't needed to because we've been muddling around okay, but in the future we do. I'm going to skip ahead. Now, one of the things I want to bring your attention to is, again, what this model is designed to do is help every single organization move forward in a way that is supportive of them. Long time ago, world far away, I developed this model. It's very similar to a whole lot of other corporate culture models. And I developed it specifically to help organizations know how to execute projects and initiatives in different cultures. So what it says is you can always do the work we're talking about. You just do it a little differently in each culture. So the way that box is positioned that says if you're in a meritocracy, a classic Silicon Valley culture, it's pretty easy. People are trained, they know that is the preferred culture for most Western educated adults. So pretty easy to do that. If you're in a process environment, it's going to be a little bit hard to convince people that all that paperwork may not be necessary. All those checks may not be necessary. But when it's important enough, yeah, they'll sort of step back and get out of your way and do it. In a network culture, and a network culture is a law firm, higher education, it actually turns out to have been Gartner research. It's any place where the basic revenue source is an independent individual who is selling knowledge expertise. You can do projects, but it's all about the width of merits. Everybody says, why should I want this? Have to take a lot more work than the team approach you get in the meritocracy. I'll be honest, from talking to client after client, the hardest place to do real change is in a familial company. It's not impossible. It's just you go slower. You check with more people. You're much more inclusive. You cannot go at the pace you would have in a meritocracy. Now, if you're coming in through the operational research, That's pretty classically consulting. And I will tell you, when I was in consulting, I was a product manager on the resource management system that Oracle Consulting used. When Larry said, if we use it ourselves, can we sell it? If so, let's make it a product and sell it. Pretty standard. You got to get to FDEs. You got to know high level skills. All of that's the same. Now, what you need to know from a mental model perspective is, how does your industry work? Again, the point of that is every single individual who does that work, any work along this line, has to know the dynamics of your own business, because that's what's going to be critically important. And what will you do first? You will do demand management. There's no way, and I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You've got to match demand to your supply. Now, in theory, most operations say, you know, we can scale, but there's still always a limit, and you've always got to make it work, and you're just going to cycle through. You've got to build the process. Now, this is where, when I show this slide, and I've been using a variation of this for a very long time, it's here when people realize that you can't do this in Excel. It just does not help you. It's a one-time off. Years ago, I saw a beautiful product a consulting company did to help a firm do it. They truly did an excellent job. And then when I looked at it, I said to the individual who was showing it to me, how long did this last? And they said it lasted until a few people left, and this changed and that changed. That's why this element has to become operational first. Strategy execution. You've got to start with strategic goals. Now, I could do an entire workshop on the fact that many companies have strategic aspirations, but they don't necessarily have strategic goals. And one of the hallmarks of how you know you have real strategic goals is over to the focus area. Do your employees know what the goal is? So I was talking to Sean the other day, and I shared with him a story that I was in the UK meeting with the head of the PMO for a company. And I was in this room with beige walls and then handwritten strategic statements across 3 of the 4 walls. The 4th wall was a window. And I was talking to this gentleman, and it was clear that he wasn't focused. I kept saying, well, what does your company want to accomplish? And he was going, I don't know. And then I asked him if he didn't know, what was it that was written on 3 walls around him. And that was such a telling thing. So there were words on a wall, but he was really reflecting on the fact that there was no shared vision. He did not believe anything his company was saying, because the work he was being asked to do was not the real vision. This is where strategy execution gets tied up, and it gets difficult to work with. But again, all of this says, start with what you're sure of. Strategy, according to HBR, most company strategies are fine. What the problem is they're never translated into strategic tactics. And if they're not really translated into strategic tactics, then they're really not executable. Work has to be executable for us to actually take it on and get it done. Now, there are other things in the mental models. Adopt a team of teams model. We're going to keep coming back to the fact that decisions need to be made at the coalface. This is one of the reasons you have to focus on individuals. Again, we've talked about new work involves emergence. Emergence, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, is something unique and unforeseeable happens. Now, pretty much COVID-19, it's horrible, it's changed our world, but it was an emergent property. As I said before, look at operations. Are your people the source of revenue or strategy? Do we need to change to survive, to grow, to thrive as your two entrance points, and then start tailoring your approaches to that? One of the things that keeps coming up, and I'm going to go over this pretty quickly so we don't run out of time, is when we talk about decisions being made at the coalface, which is the lowest level of employee who understands exactly what it is. One of the pushbacks has always been, well, we can't have people have that kind of authority. I mean, that's just not appropriate. And I love this Stacey model because when you look at it, it says, well, wait a minute. You actually can train people. You can actually frame the discussion so that everybody understands. So most of the decisions that people worry about are high in agreement and high in certainty. And we go ahead and we write policies and procedures, we write desk procedures, we do all sorts of little micromanagement on the stuff that's pretty clear. Okay, make some people happy. Now we run into running programs. Well, all programs are complex and all programs are highly political. What that means is we are not going to get a perfect solution. We are going to turn a blind eye to some things. I won't even admit in public sometimes what I've had to do to get a program executed. All I can say is it wasn't illegal and it wasn't immoral, but it certainly wasn't something I would have done by choice. That's the compromise. Was it worth it to get it done? Absolutely. It was highly successful, but it took a lot of compromise. But I knew it going in. Now, IT people are often allergic to politics. I once wrote a paper on that and did some research, and politics is not something people are comfortable with. So if you're doing a complex program, you just staff it accordingly. Now, what about difficult programs? You know there's an answer. There's definite certainty that this can be done. You just don't know quite how you're going to get there. We'll call that experimenting. Again, that's a different group of people. When you're outside of that, you start training people with problem solving, listening skills. I'm a huge believer in active listening and appreciative inquiry. You start training people. The message of this slide is we've not paid enough attention to probably some of the most critical blockers that we have. And if we train people to do this, we can be comfortable with delegating decisions further down. Individual and team capabilities. I guess I just want to reiterate again that cross-functional teams and develop fixed specialist teams. I had a client once where his organization bought 20 companies every quarter. And the CIO had to bring these companies onto their technology. And when we looked at what it was taking, because he was swamped in IT, we realized that what we needed was a fixed group of 20 people, which included legal, people from IT, all of who could work on doing nothing but bringing those 20 companies in every quarter, because his company had no intention of stopping that acquisition. It does, to do that, one of the things we want to do with teams, we want a growth mindset, which most of you know about, and we want to cultivate entrepreneurial behavior. Now, effectively, I'll make this real quick because I know I'm starting to take time you'd all like back. I had dinner with a young millennial several years ago, and he shared with me some experiences that it took me a very long time to understand what he was really telling me. And I finally added up the dots and realized that a lot of millennials are uncomfortable in corporations as they're structured. They don't know how to have a sense of authority in and of themselves. So they want it to be delegated. People won't delegate it to anybody who's not comfortable with it. So we've got a blocker there. So their solution is to go jump off the cliff and become entrepreneurial. Wonderful. They sink or swim, but those who swim really learn it. I'm proposing that the entrepreneurial behavior they wish to express should be turned into intrapreneurial behavior, and that we can give them opportunities and challenges to do that kind of exploration, that kind of new thinking that they want to do in our corporations, as long as we understand it and plan for it. What's important for the future is changing. And the only one, you can look at the list, the only one I'm going to highlight here is digital fluency. Technology is really changing things. And that sounds kind of stupid because technology's been changing things my entire adult life. But I really think now, I've had 2 conversations about AI and machine learning in the last week. Now, that's not normally a conversation I have with anybody, but it's now becoming real. It's now becoming critical. So again, when we look at how we're managing, we're not trying to fit people into jobs as they exist right now. What we're trying to do is understand where the future's going and train our people and involve our people such that they're equipped to meet the future. We want people at the cutting edge, so we have to truly spend time thinking about how to accomplish that. What I liked about this is the matrix is something from Gartner. And if you'll notice in the middle, there's people, business, and things. That's part of when I really started the changes. Again, if we were in person, I'd ask you, how many of you talk to Alexa or Google? And the answer is probably a lot of you. We are already incorporating machines into our daily life. We need to start looking at what else we can do. Where can we offload things? Robotic process automation is something that can be used to unemploy people. Or I was talking to a gentleman who worked for a company who sold them. He said actually his clients really were using them to assist human beings to free them up to be more capable. This is part of our new ecosystem. Do we understand it, and can we do the right thing with it? Now, and I apologize for rushing. I apologize that we had technical problems. But for those of you who say, yeah, Donna, all good, all esoteric, here's the simple version of what I said.
And Donna, take your time too, because we'll cut into the last presentation and we can slide into a break. So we're good. Just relax. We're good.
My last slide, I promise. So this, if you just print this slide out and say, as a shortcut for what you need to do, I got everything jammed onto one page. Now, It's pretty much activity oriented. Doesn't worry a lot about mental models. But we start with the gray. We're going to model the high-level strategic resource plan. We're going to define roles and skills, because that's resource capacity planning. And then, hint, 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 to all of you, like many of my former clients who have not done this, we are going to cancel all old, late projects. We are not going to sit around and tell Gartner analysts that we've had projects running for 18 months that were originally scheduled to be 6 months. We are not going to tell them that one program has been running for 16 years. That, unfortunately, is not a lie. That is a true conversation. We're just going to clean house. If it doesn't make sense, if it hasn't delivered something by now, odds are it's not working. There are one or two exceptions I've found in my entire career, but pretty much you can go get rid of it. Next thing to do is load FTEs. Now, this is something that there's probably shades of gray here, but I'm a huge believer that says model first with FTEs, because you want it simple, you want it clear. And the only thing while we're at the simple stage is you do want to identify bottleneck resources. Then you want to do what I call model executable work. All sorts of things get into project schedules that just don't make sense. And we need to really say, what is the work that we're doing? And I will remind everybody, and I'm sorry this is a low-level distinction, but it's highly important, that work and duration are not the same thing. When you talk about human beings live in duration. We live in time. So if you give me 20 hours of work and I have 30 hours of previous commitments, I got a 10-hour gap for a week. I'm either working 10 hours of overtime or I'm not going to be done, perfect world, until a week Tuesday. We don't think about that. I can't tell you how often I've seen work estimates. We've got to fix it. What is the executable work? Who's going to do it? And how much time do they have free? Really, really free. That includes, do they have to take their kid to the dentist? It doesn't matter what it is. But if we want things done on time, we've got to address that. We can move now to named resources. This is the next step. If everybody who has not already embarked on your resource management journey just does that first blue box, you are so much further ahead. Life is so much better. And be happy with that. Don't get too far above that. Take this incrementally. Make sure you work. Then we come up with, this is where, the next step, I call it who knows what where. Now you're dealing with real people. This gets more complex. It gets more involved. Be sure you're equipped to go to that step. And by the time we get to the third step, we're really talking about the stuff that I think is important. We're talking new learning skills, creativity, encouraging personal mastery. And we're also talking about how do we improve velocity? How do we really monitor project performance? There's a lot here that is complex and advanced. It's very simple when you've done the other parts. So, again, since we've passed time, send in questions through chat. Please, if you have any questions, and I would like to invite anyone who'd like to make comments or work on the model. What my hope is that this is a community project. No one person or two people or three people can build a model that we all can live with. And that's really my goal. Years ago, I formed one of the first project management virtual communities called Newgrange back in 1997, and it ran for 14 years. I've seen what communities can do. I believe in communities, and I would like to invite everyone here to join me in working out what works for all of us. And with that, thank you very much.